Hello, Packers fans, and welcome into PackersNews.com. I'm Kassidy Hill, joined by Pete Dougherty. Pete, thanks so much for joining me today. I hope you're cuddled up and warm because it is snowy in Green Bay.
It is not long after we get done with this. I got some errands to run, and then I'm going to have to get the whole snowblower out.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I had to go. I realized that when I got ready to have lunch that I had no groceries. I was like, I was not prepared. Rookie mistake.
Well, at least you have the grocery store is not far from your house, if I remember
That's
right.
true. That's true. But I did run out. It was the first time I've taken my new car out in the snow. I admittedly went a little fast down an open area where there was no one else around just to see how it would take it, and I'm still alive, so it took it well.
Yeah, good.
Let's jump over to the Packers, though. They will not be playing in the snow on Sunday. They were going to be playing in a dome versus Detroit, a game that should be fairly winnable. But something I have discovered this week, this is my first Detroit game since joining the Packers beat. Apparently, that's sometimes the Packers' kryptonite is Ford Field. Is that what I'm understanding?
I'd have to go back and actually look. I've covered so many games there and in Detroit in general. But they have had some really bad games there where they've been the far superior team but have lost. I think I remember a Thanksgiving game several years back where they lost there, where they were a fairly heavy favorite. So they have had some rough moments there, and that's kind of division play in the NFL. I mean, those teams spend so much time studying each other during the season and in the off season because they play so often. That they learn things, and there are upsets in division play that probably shouldn't be considered that big of an upset. Now, this game is a wild card because, how long is Rodgers going to play? How long is Adams going to play? Kenny Clark, those guys. My guess, it sounds like they're definitely playing. My guess is they won't play a real long time. Maybe the first quarter. Maybe a little more than that. Maybe just a couple series, which I guess would be the first quarter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's actually one of the very first questions we got is how much of the game do you think the starters will play? Davante Adams said this afternoon he doesn't anticipate playing the whole game. He said, of course, if my head coach asks me to, then I will do so, but he does not plan on playing the entire game. He really just wants to go in there and get himself 22 yards so that he can set the new receiver record past Jordy Nelson. But
can't blame him for that.
Exactly.
And, he kind of made a point that I was thinking about this week was, he wanted to know that he was playing going in so that he prepared this week like he's playing, because otherwise it'd be really easy to lose concentration. I think those are the things that guys need to do to stay sharp. You keep your mind sharp by preparing like you would in any game, watching the same amount of film, all that stuff. And then you prime the engine and get out there and go full speed at game speed for a quarter, maybe a half. I think that's enough to keep you sharp. And then you sit, because then the injury risk keeps going up, and at a certain point, it's just not worth it.
I had get up on this morning as I was eating breakfast, and Mike Tannenbaum, former GM, comes on there with them once or twice a week. And he was the only one on the panel that said, sit Rodgers, do not play him one snap on Sunday. Some might argue the reason he's on Get Up is because he's no longer a GM for such decisions. But, I mean, do you think there's any scenario where it would, since they do have the bye week and it would essentially be 3 weeks, is there any scenario where it would make sense to just not even dress Rodgers?
Oh, I think there are teams that's exactly what they would do. There are teams that have done that in the exact same situation. I think the Chiefs did it last year.
Chiefs did it, yes.
And they made the Super Bowl, but Baltimore did it 2 years ago and they got beat in the divisional round.
I saw where the last 3 teams that have done that, none of them won the Super Bowl. Now, granted, the Chiefs made it to the Super Bowl, but they didn't win. And so,
I think the big thing is just that first game, the divisional round game, because you don't want to lay an egg in that game. In the Packers 2011, they sat everybody. And, they weren't playing quite as well at the end of that. They were 15-1 that year. They were best team most of the season. They weren't playing quite as well at the very end of the season, but still they had it all wrapped up. Matt Flynn threw for like almost 500 yards, if I remember right, against the Lions. The Packers blew out the Lions with their backup quarterback playing, was at Lambeau. And then they, some Rodgers missed that game. Then he missed, and some other starters missed, sat out wild card weekend. And then the next week they lost to the Giants in the divisional round. And the Giants went on to win the Super Bowl. And, it may have been a factor. Maybe they weren't quite as sharp. There are teams that would definitely do what, Tannenbaum suggested. And there are probably just as many teams that would do what LaFleur is going to do. I'm all for sitting guys in the preseason. When he was sitting 30-plus guys in the preseason, I thought that was the right move, even if they lay an egg in the opener, which they more than
they did.
laid an egg in that game. But this is different, and it's one and done in the playoffs, so you got to be sharp. Now, they'll be just heartsick if Rodgers hits his hand on somebody's helmet and breaks his thumb or something, or somebody else, Kenny Clark gets hurt. Even if it's an injury that just diminishes the guy and doesn't knock him out for the next game, that'll affect the team. But I agree with LaFleur. I think you got to practice for real this week and play those guys at least a little bit in a game.
Yeah. To quote Devontae Adams, there's risk in everything now. If you're scared, go to church. That was his suggestion. Callum asked, do you play Saturday or Sunday in the divisional round? I think it depends on if you're AFC or NFC, correct?
I think I think they might do one of each, and I don't think that's determined yet. I think that's determined after they find out who the teams are, because that's all done for TV. And I always have trouble remembering. I think they try to put what they would consider the marquee game. I think they try to put that one on Saturday night.
Yeah, there's two on Saturday, one at 3:30, one at 7:15, two on Sunday, one at 2, one at 5:40.
Yeah, and I think they tried to
has not been decided who's who yet.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's done after that'll be done on Sunday night, or the Sunday night after the wild card games. Or I guess actually Monday, because since there's a game, I think there's a Monday night game for the wild card this year.
There is. Yes, you're right. Yeah. David asked, of the 6 players, who do you think is coming back? Bakhtiari and Josh Myers practiced today. Jair Alexander is still on the reserve COVID list. Matt LaFleur said of Zadarius Smith, he's not here today, or that's how I think he worded it. Randall Cobb did practice again today, and I'm trying to think of who the 6th one is.
Let's see. Myers, Bakhtiari, Alexander, Zadarius Smith. Did you say him?
Yeah, I said Zadarius Smith, Cobb. We're missing somebody if they're 6.
It'll come to us as we're sitting here. I don't know. Who do you think's most likely to play of those guys? And
I think Randall Cobb for sure comes back.
Yeah.
He's been practicing long enough now and has looked okay. He's practiced in pads, which is huge. I think if Jair Alexander can get off the reserve COVID list before the Detroit game, that they even try to get him into the Detroit game for a few snaps just to test that shoulder. David Bakhtiari, I'll believe it when I see it. I would want him to play a decent bit versus Detroit to test that knee before putting him into a playoff game. And I don't know if he's going to be ready. I thought he was going to be ready 3 other times this season and, fully once. And so at this point, if they get him back, that's great, but I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, I see them. There's at least one or probably a couple questions about whether, how sharp will he be? Do you trust him putting him out there if it's, for the playoffs? And that's a legit question. I mean, he's an outstanding player, and maybe they'll see enough in practice where even if he doesn't play this week, they'd see enough where they'd say, fine, he's our guy, get him out there for the playoffs. But practice is still not the same as a game. And I'd wonder the same thing, whether would he be sharp enough to just put out there in a, if it's a regular season, you don't have to, if you lose a game because he gives up a couple sacks, hey, you're not happy about it, but you live with it. But one and done game, win or go home. I just, there's at least something to think about there.
Yeah. Wyatt with the question that has been the topic of the week. So let's just go ahead and bring it up. Do you think the offseason drama and Rodgers getting COVID will actually affect him getting MVP? Or is it only a select few individuals who would avoid voting for him? Pete, do you have an MVP vote?
I do not. Tom Spoon Silverstein has the MVP vote. There's one in. I think there's 50 voters if I remember right.
Yes, there's 50.
There's one in each market, and then 18 national reporters.
Okay.
So I find it hard to believe that many voters are going to be like Hub Arkush and not vote for Rodgers because they think he's a bad guy. Now, I didn't get the feeling reading the quotes that Arkush is not going to vote for him because he's unvaccinated. I think his quote said because of, how he handled himself in the offseason. And I strongly suspect that that because Rodgers lied about his vaccination status. You can parse words, but in effect, that's what he did. That's probably just reading between the lines. I have to think that's a factor too. Mm-hmm. But I've got to think that Arkush is very much in the minority here. That would be my strong guess is there might be a couple people who this would affect, who they choose. But I would think for most, they're just going to go strictly by, what they saw on the field. I would still bet fairly heavily that Rodgers will be the MVP.
Right. Yeah. And, you can almost see where an argument would be where if it cost his team, but it also proved how valuable he is to his team because they lost versus Kansas City without him. And I know, like with the Heisman, there was always there was a factor to the voting that had to consider the person's character. I don't know if that's part of the criteria for the MVP.
I think from what I can tell and from what Arkush said, there are no criteria. It's just pick the guy you think is the most valuable to his team, however you define that. Now, like I'm a Hall of Fame voter, and they said, and for Hall of Fame in their bylaws, those things aren't supposed to be, you're not supposed to take those things into consideration. So, I don't think I wouldn't anyway. I mean, I voted for at least one and enthusiastically voted for one or maybe two guys who I did not think well of at all from what I knew of them as human beings, but they were clearly Hall of Famers in my mind.
Right.
I just find it hard to believe many voters are going to not vote for Rodgers because of, any of this other stuff. Mm-hmm. If I were Rodgers did miss a game, and maybe if he'd been vaccinated, he wouldn't have, but they still have the best record in the NFL. So it ended up not costing his team.
Yeah. And Callan even asked, who is your MVP of the year? I mean, I think when you look at what guys have been doing on the field, I understand there's an argument for Brady. There's an argument for Jonathan Taylor. But overall, I don't know how you can look at someone besides Aaron Rodgers and give them serious consideration.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And look, there's always the danger. You cover a team, you get so familiar with them. Sometimes you overvalue guys. Sometimes you might undervalue them if you see them all the time. I really think these guys have a legitimate argument to have the MVP, the coach of the year, and the executive of the year. I mean, I think there's a pretty good chance they win all three of those. I'm not saying it's hands down going to happen, but I would strongly, if I haven't looked at it super closely, but I would strongly consider voting for all three of those guys if I had a vote.
Yeah. Well, if people do have a voter listening in, there you go. Pete's told you what to do. Let's go through and get into some other questions here. I know you have to leave us here in a few minutes, so we'll go through a few. Interesting questions since this week is coming up. Is a 17-game season too long?
Yes.
There we go.
In a word,
Why?
It's 16 is awful long. 14 is probably a much better number, but 17 is too many, and it's probably going to end up being 18 with the next CBA. So in 10 years or less, it'll be up to 18. But that's just too many games for these guys' bodies, and it's too many games for fans to watch, and it just stretches things out unnecessarily. But it's all about TV money.
It's all about the money, baby. Good question for Mike. with Zadarius Smith, possibly Bakhtiari out, should Dillon get more first-team reps this week? I'm trying to make sure I understand that correct. Are you talking about A.J. Dillon, Mike? I thought I understood it when I popped it up, and then as I read it, I got a little confused. I'm assuming you're talking about A.J. Dillon.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, who else would that be? You think that
Right.
would have to be. So yeah, I'm not sure. I see the
That may
right
be two
offhand. I
separate
don't see the
questions.
connection between the two points, but
that may be two separate. That may be a statement and a question. But should AJ? Let's
oh
go
yeah,
ahead
yeah,
and
it is.
ask,
It's two
should
separate
AJ
things.
Dillon get more first-team reps this week?
With Jones having the knee injury, that he's still. I mean, he looks fine, but he did have a knee injury a few weeks ago. Maybe and he's the smaller, more injury-prone guy, so maybe you get him fewer touches this week. I could see that. Yeah.
Yeah. Two good questions here about DBs, and so let's go through them both real quick. Kyle asked, did we ever find out if a team was trying to sign Sean Davis off of the practice squad? Strange that they signed him to the 53 and he still hasn't dressed. That is a decent question because he was signed to the active roster a couple of weeks ago and has not even dressed for a game. I mean, do you think that's something the team would do? Like if they were trying to keep him and protect, because you can use practice squad designations this year and protect guys, but it has to be week by week, I believe.
And I think you have to do those protections on like Monday. So
yeah,
if other things crop up, you can't protect the guy later in the week.
Do you think
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, and that is a good question. That's actually an interesting point, Kyle. May look into that and see if there was some questions there from other teams, some inquiries. Levi with the question about another DB, did they expect Stokes to be this good as a rookie? They acted like Goot reached on draft night. I would agree. I thought at the time he reached on draft night. I did not expect Eric Stokes to be this good this quick. Something I think we have discussed before.
Yeah, and picking that late in the round, I have to think they've got to be at least a little surprised. Yeah. I mean, obviously they really like the guy and they liked his talent and temperament and character and intelligence and all those things. But I mean, this guy's a good player. Mm-hmm. And when Alexander comes back, having those two guys at corner like next season for sure, that's as good a corner duo as you're probably going to see in the league. So it's turned out
along with Douglas,
great pick. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got to think they're at least a little surprised at how good he's been.
Yeah. I feel like everything that I thought he had issues with, I knew was teachable and coachable if someone would take the time. Like I think we discussed before, he didn't get his head. I sounded super Southern when I said that. He didn't get his head around quick enough a lot of times, and that could cause flags as well. And that's something that he's really worked on. But I guess maybe because Jair Alexander was here, I didn't think Eric Stokes would play as much. So I thought it would be a while before he really kind of got that coaching he needed. Obviously had to step up with injuries, and he's shined. It's been
cool. I
wasn't
sure. I was thinking he might not be a starter and that it would be King and Alexander in base, and then in nickel, maybe one of those two, King or Alexander, would move inside for nickel, and then Stokes would play, which would mean he'd play a lot. But he's clearly, he's way better than King already. Mm-hmm. So he's, and like we've talked about this before, but I can't remember anybody who improved as much from the start of camp to the end of camp as him, and from the start of camp through this point in the season as Stokes. Mm-hmm. He just kept getting better and better, and still does, and he's playing at a pretty high level right now.
Yeah, got to hang out with Stokes and Sean Davis actually last night here at Titletown. Ben Kurt helped put on a YouTube event. It was pretty fun, and Eric Stokes, got to talk to him for a while, and y'all, he's pretty pumped about Monday night. His Georgia Bulldogs play Alabama in the national championship, and Pete, I know I have to keep you updated on college football. Yes, there's a national championship game on Monday night. It's a kind of a big deal. And
who's playing in this game? And then what is it? This is college football you're talking about?
College, not high school. It's the step above.
Okay.
Not quite the NFL, although they can get paid now in college.
I'll probably I'll probably watch that game, though. It'll be DVR because it is horrible sitting through how long those college football. If you think the NFL games are long, those college games are what, 3.5 plus? I mean,
Oh,
that
easy.
is brutal.
Yeah. And see, I did 10 plus years of college. And so then I get here to the NFL and I'm like looking up and I'm like, well, this game's already over. I got used to 4.5 hour college games.
In the 60s and for sure, and I think even in the 70s, these games would start at, I think the normal starting time, I think, was 1, and they were done by 3.
I like it.
Yeah.
Oh, I like this, Pete. Tina says Kassidy and Pete for MVP. I can get behind that campaign.
What a nice thing to say.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to take a couple of more here. Levi says neither back should get much work. Feed Taylor. I think running back is maybe one of those where you could almost justify sitting, like giving them more rest. Would you agree?
I completely agree. It probably should. Levi's right, and I should have said that with the Dylan question, because it's not like Dylan's expendable. He's a very, very important and talented player. Yeah, I would actually, now that I think about it, both of those guys probably get pulled at the same time, and Taylor finishes out the game. I would have to think that's how they're going to play that. Running backs, it's
because
just
they're kind of 1A and 1B too.
Yeah, and it just depends on the opponent too. I mean, it can switch, and running back is just so exposed to injuries with all the hits they take that yes, that would be the one position where if they sat somebody,
set them too.
That would be, and I would still play them at least a little bit if I were the coach.
Good question here about Amari Rodgers, who is still on the reserve COVID-19 list but could come back. Polk Tornado, I like that name, says that Juwan Winfrey seems more comfortable in offense than Amari Rodgers. Do you think Amari on special teams has a negative effect on his offense? Like maybe if you keep messing up on special teams, it gets in your head?
It can't help. I will say, I don't remember him doing anything in camp. I mean, there were plays where he looked okay and he made, he got open, caught the ball, whatever. But I don't remember him ever doing anything in camp where you went, wow, like real eye-catching stuff. I don't remember any play doing that. And it certainly hasn't happened during the season. So, I mean, it could be the Packers are erring by not playing him, and that if they played him more, he'd have grown more and he'd be able to contribute more at this point. But it could be that he's just not as dynamic as advertised, or there's something else that's slowing his progress down. I mean, you can't write him off yet. I don't think that would be smart, but he is definitely, I got asked about this in the online chat that I did today. He's definitely underperformed as a rookie. I thought he would be a guy who would be playing a lot by this time in the season, back when they drafted him in April.
Last question, and it's actually going to be 2 final questions, but I'm making them one question. Steve, I believe, asked up here, yes, who is the best matchup for Green Bay in the divisional round? And I'm combining that with this question from Mike. What's more important in January at Lambeau, the Rodgers experience or having a strong running game?
I mean, if you just
the opponent could also affect this question for Mike.
Yeah, I mean, if you absolutely had to pick one or the other, you always have to go with, because the quarterback has such a profound influence on who wins or loses. So you'd have to go with that. But that running game is really important too, and then in the cold weather especially. And it's not a either or question with the Packers because they have both of those things. So they have a team a little better built to play, in December and January at Lambeau than they were even a couple of years ago.
And that being said, who do you think would be the best opponent for them in the divisional round?
Well, I'm sure they're hoping that whoever Dallas plays, assuming Dallas ends up in that 4th spot, I'm sure they're hoping it's whoever plays them, because Dallas is a good team, and they have a.
You're saying they would not want to face Dallas?
Well, I mean, if I'm them, I'd rather somebody beat Dallas and play that team than play Dallas. That's for sure. But if things go according to Hoyle and according to seeding, it looks like it'll probably be Dallas in the 4th seed, so they'd be the one to come here. I think that'd be a really interesting game.
the stories would just write themselves if it was Dallas. So I'm all for that.
The Mike McCarthy Bowl, it would be really, really interesting.
Would he have to come in on Mike McCarthy Way? I'm trying to remember in my mind which street that is.
No, they would come in. I think the teams come in on Ridge Road and then turn onto Valley
View.
Yeah,
Yep,
Valley View.
know
So
what you're talking
he would
about.
not be on Mike McCarthy Way, I don't think.
That's so sad. I'm trying to look and see where exactly Mike McCarthy Way is.
He could go stay at his house for a little while if he wanted to.
Does he still have a house here?
I'm pretty sure he does. Yeah.
Where is Mike McCarthy Way? There's Lombardi, Oneida, Ridge.
It's a couple streets south of the Armed Forces Way, which is right along the practice field there.
Okay. Well, that would have been fun. Oh yeah, there it is. It skirts the practice facility.
Yeah, it's actually 1 block south of Armed Forces Way.
Yeah, so you're right. He wouldn't be coming up that road.
Because I think the teams stay by the airport, or they stay in Appleton. I think most teams do.
Right.
So they drive up from there and then go to Ridge Road.
Yeah, I saw the Vikings coming in that way.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we are going to let Pete go to run his errands. Pete, stay safe. Don't get caught in a snowdrift. I saw a truck today caught in a snowdrift, run into a light pole. Ooh. So don't do that.
I luckily have many, many years of snow driving experience. Now watch me put the car in the ditch.
I know. This would be the time you do it.
Yeah.
Well, don't do it yet because we fly to Detroit in a couple of days. Everybody's favorite destination in January, Detroit, Michigan. But we will be there to cover it for you all. But we've got a couple more days here in Green Bay. So stay tuned to PackersNews.com for full coverage as the Packers get ready to take on the Detroit Lions.